Legends tell of a man whose very presence makes monsters tremble in fear. A man superior to tricks and deception, able to see the invisible, to do the impossible, the defender of humanity. Strong, proud, undefeatable. He is the strongest among men, a king of men. Well, that would be the case if everything wasn't a complete lie and King wasn't just a dating sim addicted otaku. Yeah, so everyone falsely believes some random dude is the world's strongest person because he happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But despite being a total fraud, King is actually one of One Punch Man's most essential characters. The reason isn't because he acts as a paragon of heroics, inspiring the forces of justice to battle monsters or anything like that, nor is it due to how his reputation debilitates monsters. King's utility is at a narrative structure and tone level rather than a panel-for-panel scope. I'm going through a series where I break down all the prominent characters in One Punch Man. Today we have a tricky one. King firmly falls in the realm of a joke character, more specifically in an archetype I like to call the lucky bumbling idiot. This is a character that doesn't really have any skills but somehow ends up achieving great feats by fate or sheer chance, as if the universe was conspiring to make things work out the way they do. I absolutely adore this kind of character. I don't know, they're just so goofy and the basic premise is just so endearing to me. Every time some crazy situation pops up, we as viewers can't help but ask, how are they going to get out of this one? King is a phenomenal example of this archetype, probably the best I've seen. The usual Achilles heel for lucky bumbling idiots is that they don't have much longevity. Once the joke gets stale, the character becomes old. King avoids this fate by being a perfect fit for the story. Now, why do I say that? To understand, let's look at One Punch Man at its core. It's a joke. The webcomic's entire premise is a satirization of traditional shonen manga and anime. Normally the heroes train, develop, mature, and grow throughout their adventures to face increasing odds. But Saitama's already done all that off screen. As such, he doesn't have any more room to grow. Saitama is not only the strongest man, but the strongest thing in the universe. A narrative like One Punch Man has to be very careful or else it will find itself falling into the many potential pitfalls that surround it. The most relevant for us today are retelling the joke and the overpowered protagonist. Like the lucky bumbling idiot, One Punch Man must not wear its premise thin. There's only so many times we can see Saitama punch something, kill it instantly, then despair over how easy the fight was. As with any joke, it's funny until you hear it for the 15th time. The solution to this problem is pretty simple. We, as hypothetical authors, need to diversify our storytelling by adding conflicts and destinations that aren't Saitama one-shotting stuff. But this is where the OPMC issue comes up. Our protagonist is invincible. What conflicts could believably confront him? This is a much more difficult problem to work around, but it's not impossible for us to do so. If the main character cannot be challenged by what the world has to offer, then we simply need to focus on secondary characters who are. This is why plots with powerful central protagonists often have a large cast of main characters. What makes this approach tricky is how delicate balancing the story's attention and screen time on the cast of other characters and our protagonist often ends up. It's mandatory to focus on other characters for stakes, but if we shun our protagonist too much, readers ask, hey, Garo's cool and all, but isn't the story supposed to be about Saitama? What's he up to? So Saitama needs to do things, but we can't have him fight too much. We must ask ourselves, what other ways can we add depth and development to Saitama's character? What if no one knew how strong he was? What if everyone thought he was just some run-of-the-mill weak hero? Now that you mention it, it would be pretty boring if everyone saw Saitama as the godlike being he actually is. But there's a lot that could be done with people ignoring him. There is a problem, however. Saitama still defeats a bunch of extremely powerful monsters. How do we find a satisfying way to avoid giving him the credit? One Punch Man uses many tricks to do this, from having nobody witness his victories to attributing his feats to others. Oftentimes it's both, and that's where King comes in. Most of King's heroic achievements are in reality Saitama's doing. By tripping into a puddle of blood near Vaccine Man's corpse, King became the main frontman for Saitama's accomplishments. There are others who do this as well, and King doesn't only get credit for Cape Bali's actions, but for the most part King's feats are just Saitama's in disguise. Aside from his intimidation-based ones. With King around, we have a believable explanation for why no one puts two and two together and realizes how strong Saitama actually is. Whenever some freak phenomena happens, normal citizens immediately spin tales on how his King's doing. A massive dent on the moon, King used it as a punching bag. Monsters randomly go missing, King took them out. Unknown lights in the sky, King, well, we haven't heard the stories yet, but you know how this is going to be rationalized by the public. Although One Punch Man is a comedy series at heart, it takes its side characters and events seriously for the same reason we talked about earlier. It would be boring and repetitive otherwise, with the only constant exception being King. He acts as a way to ease narrative tension while still progressing the plot in a way that is true to the series' humorous tone. Despite his position as a gag character, King has a real impact in the story. His infamy among monsters allows him to goad the more violent ones and terrify meeker opponents. For Elder Centipede, he was able to minimize collateral damage by drawing it away from the city and close to the ground for Saitama to cleanly finish it off. During the massive battle with the Monster Association, King stalling for time saved the lives of several heroes. Sure, his ultimate purgatory hellfire wave motion cannon is a farce, but the King engine and his accidental threats are extremely effective. If King wasn't there, the heroes might not have lasted until Garo arrived. He also has so much authority that people just believe whatever he says without question, and this has bailed Saitama out as well. If he claims the guard robots spontaneously exploded, they must have been faulty. There's no way King is lying, and Saitama just punched them. Nope. On that topic, King and Saitama have a special relationship. King is Saitama's one voluntary friend. Genos, Bang, and Fubuki force themselves on Saitama and crash out his place from time to time, or always if you're Genos. King, however, doesn't do this and casually hangs out like a normal person. Unlike anyone else in the series, King both knows how strong Saitama is and can interact with him without any pretenses. Genos has the whole master-student thing, Fubuki is far too prideful, and Bang mostly keeps to himself. Because of this, King is the only person Saitama is willing to open up with. As such, they know each other's secrets. King knows how bored and empty Saitama is, while they know King's true power, or lack thereof. Saitama very intentionally doesn't grow much, if at all, as a person or a Heres throughout the series. But if there's anyone who can get him to, it's King. Although Saitama couldn't see past the gaming analogy, his conversation with King holds most of the answers he seeks. Just because he can't get any stronger doesn't mean there's nothing left for life to offer him. All he needs to do to find happiness is embrace the other elements of being a person and a hero. But Saitama isn't willing to do that and is only willing to complain instead. King is also the only person who can defeat Saitama with ease, in video games at least, giving him something to be competitive over. Though Saitama doesn't seem to be too dedicated to improving at games, he just wants to win to protect his pride. To finish things off, let's talk about predictions for the future and rank King's power level. As the series progresses, I don't see anything changing with King's place in the story. I mean, he's even tried to become strong by actually training for God's sakes, but every teacher he went to didn't think they had anything to teach him. Speaking of God, it's interesting to think about how King would react to God's temptations, as he has good reason to take the deal. Would he take the opportunity to finally have real power? Out of all the possibilities, it's the most likely way for him to truly become powerful. That's not going to happen though. It would go against everything the character stands for, and the author doesn't seem keen on giving King any real powers, instead only exploring King becoming more courageous. As for rankings, King the Legend is maxed out. He's the strongest person on Earth and the bane of all monsters. King the Man, however, is as weak as they come. He's just a normal guy, but in terms of plot relevance, he's actually surprisingly important. King helped defeat Elder Centipede, saved Tareo, told Bang where the Monster Association was, which is the only reason they found Garo, and has stopped many crimes. All in all, King ends up being fairly important to the plot somehow.